Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we are back with another brand new Mattel Jurassic World release, but this time, as you can see, this is the Legacy Collection Jurassic World Reimagined Indominus Rex. And what's cool is you can now see that, again, it does state Legacy Collection. Again, previously, I think it was just labeled as Reimagined, but this obviously shows you that, again, it's kind of like those two lines combined. But we clearly have the Indominus that looks very much so like the Level 40 Indominus Rex, or you can look at it as being very similar to the older Hasbro Dino Hybrids Indominus. But you can also take note to the fact that the packaging looks pretty nice. We've got pretty much kind of like a really cool backdrop here, replicating Jurassic World. As you can see, a really nice kind of jungle type setting, and then over here, the smashed gyrosphere. So that's a really neat little backdrop there. Obviously, the Indominus did not have this kind of coloration in Jurassic World, but I really quite like the fact that they've included that, and overall that's a very nice backdrop that would be fun to continue to display the figure in front of. And then if we turn the box around, take a look at the back. First of all, you've got a really nice shot of the figure right there. You can also see that it has roaring sounds and real feel skin. Over here to the side, a few more images of the Indominus, and then over here we have some more of the Jurassic World Reimagined sets, again with that Demon Carnotaurus, which I absolutely adore. So let's go ahead, pop this open and check it out. So here is our new reimagined Indominus Rex, and it definitely looks really cool. I would say sculpt-wise, it probably is the closest that Mattel has gotten so far to a more accurate interpretation of the Indominus, which I really like. You know, the first one looked really cool. The second one was really cool as well, but I felt like that one was a little bit off when it comes to the overall look of the head sculpt and everything. This one, however, looks a whole lot more spot on to the way the Indominus looks as far as the actual sculpt goes. So we're going to go ahead, readjust the camera, and then get a closer look. So starting here in the head sculpt, you can see straight away, again, the head sculpt looks great. It definitely looks, in my opinion, just like it does in Jurassic World, so that's a huge plus, and honestly gives me the feeling that I'm gonna have to buy another one of these at some point and probably repaint it to actually look like the standard Indominus Rex, because I feel like it's the best looking Indominus sculpt we've had so far. We can see the skin texture looks really good, really crisp throughout. You've got the nostrils sculpted out. You can also see we've got some lighter and darker shades of grays here in the face on the upper jaw, and of course you can also see an orange eye with a black pupil. We have the red kind of creeping in from up here above the Indominus. You can kind of see like those like kind of crests up there on the top of the head right there. If you move to the lower jaw does actually have a slightly different shade of color compared to what you see with the upper side, so a little variation of color that definitely looks quite nice. And one thing I noticed immediately about this figure that really excited me is the fact that we have an articulated jaw. Both the upper and lower jaws articulate, and that's something that the Real Feel Carnotaurus was lacking, but still had, again, the ability to kind of squish it to open the mouth. But this is something that people were kind of saying they wish they had on the Carnotaurus, so we do have the articulated jaw on the Indominus, and again, I just love having a fully posable mouth with this dinosaur. I just love straight up articulation. On the inside of the mouth, we can see the tongue sculpted out, nicely painted with a pinkish tone, also a bit of a gloss coat in there. The teeth all look great on this figure as well. You could see again those kind of like erratic teeth all over the place, even some kind of teeth popping up there like right here and here, kind of popping up inside the mouth, which I really like. And since this is a newer Mattel figure, the teeth have a much sharper, genuine sharp look to them. They also have, again, a nice soft feel. You may also notice some paint on my fingers because I was just painting. This arrived and I knew I immediately wanted to get a review up for it because I'm just so hyped for the release of this one. You can see the teeth on the upper side as well look really good, painted with like a light yellowish tone, and also have a satin shine to them. And as you can see, the mouth closes very nicely. As we move back into the neck, you can see the skin texture continues to look really nice. We also have the quills up here on the back of the neck, and again, a whole bunch of kind of ridges and stuff moving down along the back of the Indominus. You can also see the reddish tone continuing to follow down from the top of the head, and it begins sort of striping down into the side of the neck. We also have the lighter tone following along the underside here of the throat. Again, that same light tone we had in the lower jaw, just adding a little variation of color. And actually that coloration runs all the way down here, ending right before we kind of reach into like the groin area of the Indominus. There is a little bit of a seam right here as we lead back, but that's because this area is like a hard plastic. Here is where we begin the real feel, and as you can see, it is a nice, really soft and definitely feeling quite durable, sort of a rubber material. I feel like it's definitely the type of material that will stand the test of time, if you ask me. It doesn't feel cheap at all. As we move down, the red tone continues to follow along. You also see a darker grayish brown sort of tone pick up. Again, actually quite a bit of paintwork for this figure, which is nice. You can see the light gray here, but it transitions to this darker shade of gray moving down, and the arms continue to be the lighter gray, but that darker gray overtakes a large portion of the body with the reddish tone following along the back. Again, we've got all of the ridges following along the back as well. All sorts of osteoderms and bumpy scales picking up as we move down through. We have the red continuing to stripe down. As you move down into the arms, again, like I said, they are the lighter gray, and the transition to those is definitely a little abrupt. It doesn't look super smooth, but I don't think it really takes away from the figure in my opinion. As we lead down, it's also cool because it's a little bit hard right here, but once you move into the elbow, basically you can see a little seam right there because it transitions to a rubber. So then we have really flexible arms and flexible hands, again with that real feel sort of gimmick going on. You can also see the quills leading off of the back of the elbow, which are also nice and soft. And that should mean, yes, I was going to say that should mean we have sharper looking claws, and although they're not absolutely perfect, they definitely have a bit of a sharp look to them. Unfortunately unpainted though, which is definitely a little upsetting. But leading down into the hands, we can see some scoots moving down the fingers and everything. It all looks really quite nice as far as the sculpt goes in the hand and the arm. Again, the skin texture looks great the entire way through. Moving back into the stomach, we can see the skin texture continuing to look really quite nice. Pretty smooth transitions as we lead down, kind of from the darker gray to a little bit of a lighter tone to that very light tone of the underside. We can also see a slit in the stomach, and that is because I believe this Indominus can swallow figures. Yep, absolutely can. So you can swallow some stuff and pull it out of the stomach like old school Kenner, again with the old bull T-Rex. Again, we have the same thing going on with this Indominus. Also what we had with the Red Rex as well. But as you move back into the leg, you can see the lighter gray moving along the rear part of the leg, the darker gray moving along the front of the thigh, kind of striping back. We have more really nice looking skin texture and scales and osteoderms moving down. You can see the knee right there. You can also see the calf. The leg is not a real feel, it's a harder plastic, but as you move down you can see all of the detail you would expect to find is definitely present on the figure. Really nice looking foot sculpt, nice crisp scales and scoots down the toes. The nails are painted, sort of. They're a different piece, as Mattel has been doing lately, where they basically just apply a different piece up into the bottom of the foot, but that gives us the appearance of painted nails with a darker tone, which is nice, but unfortunately no painted dew claw. Shocker there. But we do have swivel articulation in the ankle, which is nice. Also, you can move the arms forward and back, of course, which is a huge plus for that area, and the legs can go forward and back really quite smoothly, actually, which is nice. I was a little concerned. Again, now I'm going to be a little weary when it comes to some of the Mattel articulation after the recent Tail Thrash and Spinosaurus and the articulation being so limited in the legs of that one, but this one definitely does not have that issue. As you move up into the tail, you can see more of that reddish tone continuing to stripe down, but as we lead out about halfway through the tail, it does disappear. Same deal for the darker gray, which is more of like a striping effect now at this point, also disappearing. And then we have just the light gray for the remainder of the tail of the figure, but the detail continues to look really quite nice. However, I will say the tail definitely looks a bit too short, which is pretty much the only downside as far as the sculpt of this one goes, I would say. I feel like the tail might be the shortest that we've had on any of the Indominus, but it's definitely a little bit too short, in my opinion anyway, for this dinosaur. On the opposing side, of course, it's going to look pretty much the same. Same super nice looking head sculpt, really nice looking paintwork. The arms, of course, are poseable, so depending on where you want to put them depends on the way they sit on the figure, but the leg, of course, is taking a step over on this one, taking a step forward compared to trailing on the other side. So that was going to be the biggest difference from one side to the other, but it is overall a really, really nice looking Indominus, and definitely a very cool addition to the reimagined Reimagined line. I kind of wish they would release more figures because I would love to see them release a lot more in this line, but I felt the same way about the 93 Classic line, and unfortunately we did not get nearly as many figures in that line as I would have liked. But as far as the actual action features and everything goes, we do have sound effects, I believe somewhere up here we have to push. So clearly we found it pretty easily. It's right above the hip region. So definitely some really fun noises, and again, as far as the actual swallowing aspect goes, I guess we'll say goodbye to Robert Muldoon as he heads down the throat of the Indominus. Yep. Oh no, he's not totally gone. We can see his legs. There, he's gone. Now he has swallowed Robert Muldoon, and as long as the action feature works correctly, we'll be able to get him back there. We can already see him hiding in the stomach of the Indominus, so we just have to pull him back out of there. There we go. He is back now. So pretty fun, again, as far as the actual playability of the figure goes. As far as a size goes for this new Indominus Rex, it's pretty similar, in my opinion, to the size of the more recent version of the Indominus. But for an actual length on the figure, we're going to see this one come in at about 21, maybe heading toward 21.25 inches, or about 53.5, I would say, about 53.5 centimeters. And then for a height, to the top of the quills on the neck, a little hair under 8.75 inches, or about 22 centimeters, maybe slightly over. For a size comparison, there is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Colovosaurus, Robert Muldoon, and the Collect Day Human Being next to our Jurassic World Reimagined Indominus Rex. And you can see, as per usual, it's definitely a nicely sized figure. I expect no less whenever Mattel releases an Indominus. There is a size comparison with the first version of the Indominus to come from Mattel, which was the larger of the two, showing you that this version is definitely in a similar size range to the newer version of the Indominus. Unfortunately, I do not have access currently to my newer version of the Indominus, but I can very clearly see it is extremely similar in size to that one. So if you have the newer one, you're definitely going to have a good idea of the size of this one. But for some other comparisons with some other Mattel figures that I do have available, we've got the new Tail Thrashing Spinosaurus, which you can see the Indominus is roughly the same size as that figure, just a little bit different as far as its proportions go. We've got the Extreme Damage T-Rex, which we can see is a little bit smaller. The Epic Roarin' T-Rex, which is roughly the same size as the Indominus Rex, extremely similar in size actually. The newer Lab Lockdown Tyrannosaurus from Mattel for Jurassic World Rebirth. We've also got the Spinosaurus from the Spinosaurus Danger Pack that has just released for Jurassic World Rebirth as well. A Wild Roar figure with the older version of the Irritator next to our Indominus, showing that again, size-wise, these are very different. And then one final comparison with the Hasbro Level 40 again, Dino Hybrids version of the Indominus, which does feature a very similar color scheme to the new Mattel version. And we can clearly see that the Hasbro version was slightly larger, but the Mattel version is just miles better. Also, one more thing that I kind of missed as far as this figure goes is the fact that it does actually have a poseable wire tail, so very Hammond collection-like as far as that goes. But with the Real Feel skin, which does extend out into the tail, that allows you the ability to articulate the tail as well. So this brand new Mattel Jurassic World Legacy Collection, Jurassic World Reimagined, Indominus Rex is a very fun figure, and in my opinion is the best sculpted Indominus Rex to come from Mattel so far. And it has Real Feel skin, so honestly it doesn't get much cooler than that. I love the Real Feel skin idea, and I love the fact that Mattel is running with it now, having quite a few dinosaurs that have included this. And the Indominus Rex, again, looks great here. The sculpt is absolutely gorgeous from head to tail. Again, speaking of the tail, it might be a little bit short, but it still doesn't take away from the figure, I think, a whole lot, because it still is extremely well done when it comes to the actual fine detail, and it is super crisp when it comes comes to just how good the detail looks on the sculpt. So definitely a really nice looking Indominus as far as the sculpt goes. Of course, we also have new updates when it comes to like the quills, which are nice and sharp looking, like they, nice and pointed like they should be. Nice sharp looking teeth. The claws and the hands also have a pretty sharp look. So lots of improvements on the figure overall, which also, again, I think helps to make this one a step above the others. We also have some fun playability with this one, which features, again, the articulated jaw, articulated arms, articulated legs, a wire tail, articulated ankles, and some pretty cool sound effects, as well as the ability to eat things like dinos and humans and kind of swallow them and pull them out of the stomach, which is a very old school action feature dating all the way back to the Kenner Lost World Jurassic Park toy line, which is super cool. And the paint apps look pretty good on this one. There's actually quite a bit of variation of color through the entire body, except for halfway through the tail. We do lose the paintwork, which is a little bit of a bummer. I would have really liked to have seen just that last little bit of paint. I feel like even the coloration ending early on the underside wouldn't have been such a big deal as long as that reddish tone and grayish tone moved out through the tail. But it still looks really good, and I'm actually quite impressed with the amount of color that Mattel put onto this one. The only thing missing, in my opinion, outside of, again, the paintwork on the tail and the paintwork moving the entire way on the underside, would be painted hand claws and the dew claw. But other than that, I think it looks really cool. So if you are interested, this actually launches on Sunday, I believe, on June 1st, with many other Mattel figures for Jurassic World Rebirth, but I had this one pre-ordered, so it arrived a little early. So I will include a link in the description to where you can still pre-order this technically on Target.com, or you can just grab it in store on Sunday. One way or another, definitely pick it up because it's pretty darn awesome. And like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.